Chapter 11. Ingrid. Ava fell to her knees beside the bushes, groping along the wall for the crack that had engulfed Persephone. The forest around us melted away, replaced by a meadow full of flowers, but it was too panicked to investigate. She didn't mean that, did she? I said as James let out a string of curses I never thought I'd hear come out of his mouth. She's crazy, said Ava. Sometimes she makes Calliope look sane. We were all glad to be rid of her when she decided to take Adonis and run. James hovered over Ava and ran his hands over the spot where Persephone had disappeared. No, you were glad to be rid of her. Henry practically tried to hang himself. Here. His hand slipped to the rock, and Ava fell back on her heels with a sigh of relief. Please, I begged. Let me come with you. I'll hide while you do the talking, but I can't wait here, knowing that every single person that matters to me could be dying in there. And I can't let you walk through that wall, knowing that you'll never walk out, said James. I'm sorry. I know how much it means to you, and we'll do everything in our power to set them free, but we can't risk your life, not when it means Henry as well. Please don't make this any more difficult for us than it already is. I gaped at him. He might as well have slapped me in the face. It had been my idea to come in the first place. The three of them wouldn't even be here if I hadn't insisted on going. I was the one who managed to get Cronus off our backs, and yet I was the problem? I'm sorry for being so darn difficult, I spat. I'm sorry for not being powerful enough to be anything but a burden. But how could you feel if you'd come all this way, if you told you were useless and couldn't help? Like crap, he said without batting an eye. But if our positions were switched, I could understand that it was the right thing to do, no matter how hard it was for me to accept. Tears stung my eyes, and I blinked rapidly. This wasn't fair. I had every right to do what I could to help. I didn't want to die, but living in a world where the council had been wiped out and Crotus ruled, we can do it, said Ava. Her eyes were wed. James and Persephone and I. He can do it as long as we don't have to worry about you two. Please, Kate. Henry loves you. Give him something to come home to. Every last bit of willpower I had crumbled, and I wiped my cheeks with my dirty sleeves. Promise me you'll come back out. Neither of them spoke. James leaned into me, and for the first time in days I didn't move away. He pressed his lips to my cheek, and he didn't have to say it for me to know what it was. Goodbye. I watched them disappear into the wall, Ava first and James second, to make sure I didn't follow, and once they were gone I collapsed into the moss beneath me. A sob escaped from my throat. As the weight of helplessness and grief crushed me, leaving me with nothing, Persephone would open the gate, and the moment was done. Crotus would kill them all, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I didn't know how long I sat there with my face buried in my hands as sob after sob ripped after me. My chest ached and my entire body trembled, but as badly as I wanted to follow them, I couldn't. No matter what happened, Calliope could still win. She would kill me the instant I walked through the wall, or Persephone would release Crotus, and then Calliope would kill me. My panic was slowly replaced with an overwhelming need to see what was happening. Desperate, I struggled to focus and pushed my mind into the cavern beyond the crack, but all I saw was the black rock in front of me. I tried over and over again and again until my sobs turned into growls of frustration. Nothing changed. Why could I do it so easily without meaning to, but then the lives of my family hung in the balance. I couldn't see so much as Henry's face. Hello? I jumped, half expecting Calliope to have somehow snuck up behind me. I scrambled to my feet, ready to bolt, to break her nose, whichever was easier. Instead, I came face to face with a freckled redhead clutching a bunny. Who are you? I said. And when she took a step toward me, I moved back. Ingrid, she said. Who are you? I forced myself to relax. The field had come from someone. Most of the others in the underworld had either avoided us or hadn't seen us in the first place, and when we'd spoken to them it had been brief, and Ava usually handled it. This was another one of them. This time it was only me. I'm Kate, I said. I'm sorry for intruding. I'm waiting for James and Ava, she said without a hint of surprise. I know. I saw you. I blinked. How do you know their names? Had she been close enough to overhear? I couldn't remember if I'd used them while we'd argued. Because Henry introduced them to me. She scratched her buddy between the ears and placed it down gently. It hopped off to join a cluster of other animals that seemed to be waiting for Ingrid to come back to them. Henry? I tugged nervously on my sleeves. How do you know Henry? The same way you do, she said cheerfully. You're his wife, right, Kate? You're the one Calliope was talking about. My heart skipped a beat. Calliope was here? When? Ages ago, Ingrid shrugged. Then she went off and left even though she wasn't supposed to. Henry said. Henry again. How could she know Henry? Had he passed judgment on her? But that didn't explain how she knew Calliope or what she was doing here, except my eyes widened. You're one of the girls Calliope killed, aren't you? She beamed, which was exactly the response I hadn't expected. You've heard of me? That's amazing. You're kind of my idol, you know. Calliope had killed 11 girls before I'd come to Eden, but the underworld was so vast that I never thought I'd run into one of them. I am? I stammered. Why? She gave me a look that made it clear it should have known. Because you wanted, you punished her for what she did to me. To us, I mean. She sighed. It's terrible, isn't it? That she got away with it so many times. I spent forever thinking I was the stupid one for falling for her act. You weren't stupid, I said. She's a goddess. She grinned. So are you now. Tell me about it. How is it? What can you do? Can you walk on water? Can you fly? I've always wanted to fly, you know. It'd be incredible, wouldn't it? And to live forever? I mean, the underworld is nice and all, but it isn't the surface. What did it matter if I was immortal when a titan wanted to kill me? So far, being a goddess has been anything but incredible. What do you mean? She said. I hesitated, but Ingrid was dead anyway, and it wasn't as if she could leave. Besides, she'd probably heard the rocks falling too. For all I knew, the entire underworld had. She deserved an explanation. So I told her. I kept it short and withheld a few details. But by the time I was done, all the blood had drained from her face, and she scooped up another rabbit to cuddle for comfort. They went in there and left you here? She said, and I nodded. That's awful. They could already be dead. It's been ages. Yeah, I mumbled. I didn't need the reminder. You should go anyway, she said, perking up at the idea. You bested her once, so it's not like you can't do it again. If anyone can, it's you. I bit my lip. She killed me, too. I said, the only reason I'm alive is because my mother traded places with me. So Ingrid took a step closer to me, and this time I didn't move away. That was when you were mortal. You're not anymore. You're a goddess, too. And so what if you can't control your visions? You won't need them if you go in there. But if I let her kill me, then there's no telling what Henry will do, I said. If Persephone tells Calliope how to release Cronus, then they'll need Henry to have a prayer of winning. Ingrid sighed. You don't get it, do you? You're one of them now. So what if Calliope's more powerful? She's not that special, you know, and she can't kill you now. Gods can't kill other gods, but Titans can. You said you made a deal with Cronus. It sounds to me like he's a lot less likely to kill you than he is the others. You tried to be nice to him, and you weren't the one to lock him up. I hesitated. She had a point, especially if Calliope continued to order Cronus around. He hadn't seemed willing to put up with it much longer. More than anything, I wanted to say, to heck with it, and go in after them. But that didn't solve the problem with Henry. If something happens to me, it won't, she said firmly. You bested the queen of the gods, and now you're a queen of the underworld. I'm not. I scowled at the unoffending flower. Cronus interrupted the ceremony. So you're still queen? You don't need a stupid ceremony to prove it. As I stared at the blossoms at my feet, I realized with a start that they were the same ones that Henry had been sending. This was where he'd gotten them. It really hadn't been him after all. He'd wanted me to come here. He wanted my help. I can't risk it like that, I said, although my resolve was waning. I can't risk Henry's life. Ingrid gave me an exasperated look. Listen to what's happening. It's been ages. James and Ava aren't back yet, and while they might still be trying to sneak around Calliope, chances are they've been captured too. If they don't come out, what are you going to do? Wait for Calliope to throw their bones through the cracks so you know what happened? Or are you going to be our queen and fight for your realm? It wasn't my realm, though, it was Henry's. I don't even deserve to be here, I all but wailed. Henry should have let me die. I don't deserve to be a goddess or his wife or his queen or any of it. I never have. I'm only here because I want the last one left. Ingrid tilted her head like a confused puppy. Of course you deserve to be here. Henry's not stupid. He would never trust his entire realm to someone who didn't think he could handle it. Not if the only other choice was losing it completely, but I didn't dare say that out loud. She let out a frustrated huff and pranced around me as if she were sizing me up. Don't you get it? You were chosen because you're special. So was I. She tossed her hair over her shoulder. If it hadn't been for Calliope, I'd be in your shoes. And you know what? I'd be scared too. I'd be really, really scared. Being brave doesn't mean never being afraid, you know. It means going for it anyway because you know it's the right thing to do. There's nothing I can do, I said miserably. How do you know until you try? She stopped in front of me and nodded toward the wall. You're the one who has to deal with Cronus, not them. If something's happened, you could be their only hope. Go help them. Prove to yourself that you deserve this. Show yourself why Henry believes in you. What if I get killed? I kicked the small stone, and it skittered a few feet until it hit the rock wall. What if I get them all killed? What if you're the reason they survive? I could see why Henry had chosen her as a potential queen. She was smart, the kind of smart I wasn't sure I'd ever be, no matter how many years I've lived, and her optimism was infectious. And what if she was right? What if James and Ava, and as much as I didn't like her, Persephone, were in trouble, and they needed me? If I walked through that wall, There was a good chance my life was no longer be in my control, but had it ever been? I'd been coasting without any expectations and ambitions for so long that I'd forgotten what it was like to be in charge of my own life. I'd poured so much of myself into helping my mother fight to stay alive that I managed to lose myself in the process. I'd done what she and Henry and everyone else had told me from the beginning. Even the choices I'd made, like choosing not to join Henry in Eden when he'd asked me, had ended in a disaster that forced me in a direction I didn't want it to go. I didn't mind, not really. I loved Henry, and the castle was becoming a family I'd never known. And as long as I survived Calliope's wrath, immortality was a nice perk, at least until everyone else had died and Henry and I were the only ones left, but I was trying not to think that far ahead. Still, I'd done it because I'd had to, because someone had made me or manipulated me into it. My mother had spent my whole life grooming me to be the kind of person who could pass the council's tests. The two friends I'd made in Eden had only approached me because they needed to guide me toward Henry. The council had ruled over my entire life in one way or another. Their expectations made me a burden to Henry. My marriage was because of them. Even my birth had been their decision. James was right. Nothing in my life had ever really been my choice, but this was, and I was going to do the right thing. All right, I said. I'll go. If Calliope kills me, I'm blaming you. Ingrid beamed. That means you have to give me credit when you save their lives. How can you be so darn sure I'll make it out of there when you don't even know me? She set the bunny down and promptly embraced me. I didn't have time to move away, and I didn't think I would have any. Her skinny arms were warm around me, and I needed a hug. Henry believes in you. That's enough for me. Thanks, I said awkwardly. I'll try. Once she released me, I ran my hand over the stone, trying to find the crack. Just as my fingertips sank into the rock, Ingrid said in her small voice, Kate? Yeah, I said, slowly sliding my whole hand inside. It worked. It really worked. My heart pounded. My fingers curled around the cold stone as the meadow around me started to spin. All I had to do was step through, and then I would enter. Sorry, then I would either come back or I wouldn't, but at least I wouldn't have to live knowing I hadn't tried. Could you come see me sometime? She said. When you're not busy, I mean. Calliope was the only company I had besides Henry, and he doesn't come by that often either. Even if she hadn't asked, I would have come. Of course. Didn't you have family? She shook her head, and for a split second her face crumpled. Henry was my family. I knew him for a long time before. She cleared her throat and straightened, and this time her smile was forced. Anyway, now you have to live or else die of boredom down here, and you wouldn't want that on your conscience, would you? I laughed weakly. Thank you for everything. I'll see you soon. And without a second thought, without giving that voice in the back of my mind the chance to talk me out of it or say James and Ava knew what was better for me than I did, I stepped through the wall and my world went black. Chapter 12. Chained. This time when I opened my eyes and saw Cronus's cavern, it wasn't a vision. I froze as I took in the scene before me. I'd half expected to see the bloodbath Calliope had promised, except instead of me as the victim, she would have taken her rage out on Persephone. But Persephone stood in the center of the cavern, completely unscathed. Her eyes were narrowed, and her hands on her hips as she stood face to face with Calliope, and neither of them said a word. Why wasn't she torn to pieces, or at the very least bloodied and broken? And where were James and Ava? The eldest members of the council were still chained together in the mouth of the cave, and as far as I could tell, they were all unconscious. I only counted 5, though, and I couldn't see any signs of Ava's telltale blonde hair. Then I spotted Cronus. The fog swirled around the bars of its cage, and instead of going after Persephone, it moved upward, toward the high ceiling, forming a pool at the top. Only a few feet below, hanging from their arms by tendrils of fog, were James and Ava. Any question of whether or not I'd done the right thing vanished. At best, Calliope would hold them all hostage. At worst, they would be dead as soon as she dealt with Persephone. I squinted, searching for any signs of life from either of the two bodies dangling from the ceiling. Nothing. I don't have all day, Calliope's voice cut through the silence, and a shiver ran down my spine. Her innocent girly tone was gone, replaced by the all-encompassing voice of a deity, the same sort Henry used when he was mad. It is full of commands and demanded respect, and even though I was hidden, the urge to obey ran through me. I don't know what you want from me, said Persephone exasperatedly. What was she doing? I've already told you I'm not saying anything unless you let them go. You can't keep me there, and I'm perfectly happy. Walking back to my little slice of paradise in forgetting any of this ever happened. Calliope swore, and a jolt of pure power shook the cavern, blasting a chunk of rock out of the wall behind Persephone. Instead of doing something sensible like falling down dead or crying out in agony, Persephone laughed. Is that really all you've got? I have eternity to play these games, but if all you're going to do is repeat the same thing, it's going to get tedious quickly. I will have Cronus kill them one by one until you tell me, said Calliope, her voice rising until it all but crackled. I will do it slowly, and I will make sure they know you're the one responsible. If you hurt a single one of them, the deal's off, and you'll be stuck babysitting a bunch of limp bodies forever, said Persephone. I'm sure Cronus wouldn't appreciate that very much. The fog lashed out, but it went straight through her torso, and Persephone didn't so much as flinch. For some reason, they couldn't hurt her, and she must have known. That was why she'd gone in. This had been her plan all along, unless she'd just gotten lucky. Do you think I'm stupid? Said Calliope, her words dripping with contempt. I know exactly what will happen the moment I remove their chains, and it doesn't end well for me. It won't end well for you no matter what happens, said Persephone. You managed to get yourself stuck in an impossible situation, and the only person you have to blame is yourself. Calliope growled, and the walls around us shook. Worried the entire cave was going to collapse on us, I took a step backward towards the gap in the wall. Getting buried alive as an immortal, no less, wasn't on my list of things to do. At last the trembling stopped, and Calliope said in a voice so soft I had to strain to hear her, Bring me Kate, and I'll let them go. Let them go, and I will, countered Persephone. Forgive me if I don't trust you, but you haven't been very reliable as of late. Calliope scowled. I won't do it, not without Kate, and if you won't bring her to me, then there's no point continuing. She'll come sooner or later, and until that happens I'll wait. Darn it. Of course, the one choice I'd made on my own was the one thing that could Persephone's plan. I inched toward the exit. If I could find it before Calliope saw me, then I'd slip out and wait for Persephone to join me. Ingrid would hide me if I explained what was going on, and then the three of us could strategize. If Persephone could come back inside the tavern, then so could Ingrid, and maybe Calliope wouldn't be able to hurt her either. They could distract her while I freed the others, and a hiss of energy made my hair stand on end, and the boulder I'd hidden behind exploded. I instinctively covered my head and ducked as the shattered rock flew through the air, but the pieces glanced off me, leaving my body unharmed. Dead silence filled the cavern. Everything inside me screamed to run. I clawed at the rock and still had been immortal. I would have scraped my fingertips down to the bone, but I couldn't find the way out. Calliope's wicked laughter reverberated through the cavern, and I stopped struggling. It was pointless. She'd seen me, and there was no escaping now. That didn't take long, she said in a sing-song voice. You really can't do anything right, can you, Kate? You can't even rush in to save your precious Henry the way you wanted to. I clenched my jaw and didn't say a word. That was exactly what Calliope wanted to me off. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Hera, said Persephone, but Calliope raised a hand to silence her. Persephone glared at me. I didn't blame her. This certainly changes things, doesn't it? Said Calliope cheerfully. She beckoned for me to come closer. When I didn't move, she gestured, and an irresistible force pulled me toward her. No amount of digging my heels into the ground made any difference. I was only a few feet from her when she lifted that surge of power and thrown off balance. I collapsed onto the floor. Her foot connected with my stomach, and the air left my lungs. That's for being such an idiot, she said. You're pathetic, you know, not even worthy opponent. It's like picking the wings off a fly and watching it fly the round. I would know, I wheezed. I'm not sadistic like you. She kicked me again, and this time her foot connected with my chin. It stung, my head whipped back. If I'd been mortal, I was sure it would have broken my neck, but she couldn't win that easily anymore. Stop it, said Persephone. All she did was pass a stupid test. I know you love Hades, but there are better men out there, trust me. Trust you, Calliope rounded on Persephone. Why would I possibly trust you? You destroyed him. You took his love and shoved it back in his face, like Walter did to me. You couldn't possibly understand what that feels like, you heinous. Don't, I said, struggling to my feet. She wanted to be happy. There's no crime in that. There is when you shatter someone else in the process, said Calliope with a snarl. Besides, it's not about that, not anymore. Henry made his choice when he backed up your punishment. Do you really think I would have kidnapped him if I thought I still had a chance? So you're going to kill him because I decided you had to face the consequences for what you did? I said. Are you serious? Calliope grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked my head back. I'm serious when I say you're not getting out of here alive. If Persephone won't tell me how to open the gate, then I'll get Henry to do it instead. Across the cavern in the mouth of the cave, where the others lay unconscious, Henry's body jerked upward. His chains rattled and separated from the others, dragging along the ground as he floated toward us. A knot formed in my throat at the sight of his bloodied body, even worse than it had been in my last vision, But he was alive. As long as Calliope didn't know how to open the gate, then she wouldn't kill either of us. She couldn't. Henry wouldn't open it if we were dead. Wake up, she growled, and Henry opened his eyes. My heart skipped a beat, and for a long moment we stared at each other. His eyes were the same bizarre shade of moonlight, but the spark was gone. I searched for any sign that he was in there, any indication that he could fight, but it was as if he didn't even see me. He'd given up. Henry, I whispered, and he blinked. Henry, please look at me. He was already looking at me, but he didn't see me, and I didn't know how to ask for that. He wasn't there. Whatever Calliope and Cronus had done to him, he had retreated so far into himself that the rest of the world didn't exist. Calliope grabbed the loose end of his fog-infused chains and whipped it across his face. I gasped and struggled against her, but she held on to me with inhuman strength. A bright red pattern bloomed across Henry's cheek, and at last he shook his head and came to. He touched his face and winced, and I exhaled. He was in there after all. Instead of looking at me, however, his gaze focused on something behind me, and his jaw went slack. Persephone? I would have rather been sliced open by Cronus than experienced the gut-wrenching pain that came with hearing her name before mine. Look who decided to join us, said Calliope, tugging on my hair. Henry tore his gaze away from Persephone to focus on me, and the look on his face made my stomach turn. Seems someone doesn't have a brain in her head, but that's no surprise, is it? You sure know how to pick them. I didn't have to do a thing. They both waltzed in here all on their own, practically gift wrapped for me. Henry's expression hardened. What do you want? Do we really need to go through this again? Said Calliope. Tell me how to open the gate, and I'll let them go. Henry, don't, I said. It's a... Calliope slapped her hand over my mouth. Without thinking, I licked her hand exactly as I'd done to James. I would have bitten her if I could have, but saliva was enough. She made a disgusted noise and pulled her hand away, giving me enough time to finish. It's a trap, I said. She can't hurt Persephone, and she's going to kill me anyway. Calliope wiped her hand off my shirt, and her grip on my hair tightened. Doesn't matter. We both know Henry has no choice but to risk it. I struggled against her, but it was no use. Calliope would sooner pull out every strand of my hair than let me go. Please, I said. Henry, you can't. It isn't worth it. All right, Calliope, he said quietly. I will tell you how to open it on the condition that you let Kate go first. Calliope sniffed. Hardly. You have to offer me some insurance, said Henry. What will it be? She caught me in a chokehold, her arm crushing my windpipe. You tell me, the gate or your pretty little wife. The muscle in Henry's jaw twitched, the same one that told me when he was on the verge of imploding. Persephone, then, he said. You let Persephone go, and I will tell you what you want to know. Done. Calliope weighed Persephone off, but Persephone made no move to go. You're an idiot, she said to Henry. They can't hurt me, and I'm not leaving. It doesn't matter to me, said Calliope. I've held up my end of the deal. Persephone's free to go, and it isn't my fault she doesn't want to. So you still have to tell me how to open the gate. Fair's fair. Henry was silent, and I opened my mouth to protest, but no sound came out. Calliope thought this was supposed to be fair, releasing a titan to go destroy the world for revenge, killing everyone that got in her way. What part of any of this was fair? My vision began to blur, and I stomped on her foot, but she barely moved. I would have given anything to get my hands on Henry's fog-infused chains. Chop, chop, said Calliope, tightening her grip. Kate's suffocating. She will wake up the moment you let her go, said Henry coolly. And nothing Calliope said could possibly match the gaping hole his words left inside of me. The room started to spin, and bright spots appeared in my vision, though I wasn't sure if it was from what Henry had said or the lack of oxygen in my body. Either way, using what little strength I had left, I clawed at Calliope's arm and tried again and again to shake her off. Nothing worked. Persephone, leave, he ordered. She scoffed. I'm not going anywhere. Power began to build up around him, every bit as dark and dangerous as Calliope's. You will do as I say and leave immediately. I am your king, and you will obey me. Persephone huffed and spun her on her heel. Fine, she said, as she stormed toward the other side of the cavern, where the crack in the wall waited for her. See if I ever try to help you lot again. The tension in the air seemed to crackle, and once again she was gone. Henry exhaled and refocused on Calliope. In order to open the gates, the ruler of the underworld must willingly sacrifice blood against each of the bars. He spoke monotonously, as if he no longer cared, and I wasn't so sure he did. Calliope loosened her grip around my neck, and I fell to my knees. My lungs felt as if they were on fire, and I sucked in the cold, precious air as my body regained its strength. Interesting, said Calliope. She looped the end of Henry's chains around my neck. They burned white-hot against my skin, but at least she didn't tighten them. It seems you do have some level of intelligence, after all. Must I even ask? For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw a hint of a smile on Henry's face. When I blinked, it was gone. You're asking me to release the most powerful being in the universe, who will undoubtedly wreak havoc on the world before wiping out humanity and killing us all? Yes, said Calliope, apparently unfazed by the future Henry painted. In exchange for Kate's life. in exchange for the life of a girl I met a year ago and I've only seen for a few minutes in the past 6 months. Something inside of me crumbled and I forced myself to my feet. He was right. I wasn't worth it. I'd known I wasn't before he'd said it, but somehow hearing the words come out of his mouth made it real. Even if he did love me, I was one person. I was one life. It would have been foolish for him to open the gate to save me, no matter how he felt. Calliope sighed. You might have the rest of them fooled, but I know you better than you know yourself. Your bluff won't work. How certain are you that I'm bluffing? Said Henry. Calliope said nothing. Very well, since Kate insists that you will kill her anyway, and since it is clear that you have no intention of letting her go, why don't I leave you with your bounty instead of offer up another trade? I will open the gate for you after you release the others. He glanced up toward the ceiling where James and Ava hung. All of the others. Calliope's eyes narrowed, and she drummed her fingers against her thigh. You won't put up a fight for Kate? She said, and Henry nodded. How do I know it isn't a trap? How could it possibly be? He said. Cronus is here, and Kate is of no importance to the council, whether or not she lives or dies. You will have the upper hand. You of all people know we cannot win against him without you. I am merely asking that my family be returned so we can prepare to surrender with dignity. I couldn't breathe, and all this time it had nothing to do with the chains Calliope had around my neck. Henry meant it. Whether or not he'd been bluffing before, there was agony in his voice. It jolted through me as if it were my pain as well. He knew it was a lost cause. Calliope wanted me, and he wanted his siblings back. I have to go. I heard something strange. I don't know what I heard. It was very weird. I'm back. I thought I heard something weird. He wanted his siblings back. It was a fair trade, and all he would lose was a girl he barely knew. I was really going to die. The countless hours I'd spent preparing myself for the possibility during our trek through the underworld did nothing to cushion the gut-wrenching realization that I wasn't going to exist any longer. I had no idea what happened to gods after they faded, but considering Persephone had turned mortal to join Adonis in the underworld, I assumed there wasn't any sort of afterlife. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Not like this. "Henry, please," I said in a choked voice. I brushed my fingers against his, and despite his stony face, his Adam's apple bobbed. He didn't look at me. I came here knowing this was a possibility, that Calliope would rip me apart and I would never go home again, but I never expected Henry to give his blessing. Before this I'd managed to hold on to the hope that somewhere inside of him he loved me, but that had vanished now, along with every last bit of inner strength I needed to let Calliope steal the rest of my life all over again. "How touching," said Calliope. "Very well, Henry, you have yourself a deal." She waved her hand, and James and Ava began to descend. I heard a groan from the mouth of the cave, and before I could see who it was, my mother moved involuntarily toward the gate, and the menacing fog swirled around it. Henry moved as well, his feet dragging along the ground. "Please don't," I gasped as everything inside of me drained away, leaving me with nothing but the overwhelming instinct to survive. I clawed at the chains around my neck, but they burned my hands, and it was no use. Whether I died at Calliope's hand or Henry released Cronus and he ripped me apart for her, I didn't stand a chance if Henry wasn't going to fight. And he was opening the gate. He couldn't. He couldn't. "By the time you've opened it, the others will be awake enough to leave," said Calliope, "unless you want me to change my mind, and put them to sleep again. I would get started if I were you." With his mouth set in a thin line, Henry picked up a piece of fog-infused stone nearby. At first I didn't realize what he was doing, but then he pressed a sharp corner of his palm and dragged it down. I covered my mouth, horrified. Scarlet blood pooled in his hand, and he pressed it against the first bar of the gate, whispering something I couldn't hear. "Henry," I was sobbing a mess now, but I didn't care. He was going to get everyone killed. "Don't do this, please. I'll do anything." He didn't so much as flinch. As Henry pulled his hand away, the bar groaned, and the stone split through the middle of the mark his blood made. Calliope hovered, wearing a giddy grin. And as her excitement grew, her grip on the chain around my neck loosened. Wild hope filled me as I slipped my fingers between my neck and the links. Nothing I said could stop Henry, but if I could slip away— "The next one!" cried Calliope. Henry closed his eyes and pressed his hand against the second bar. It was too crumbled. I frantically worked myself loose from the chain while Calliope was too preoccupied to notice. Her entire body seemed to tremble with excitement, and the fog spilled out from between the open portion of the gate, all but obscuring Henry. I could still see Calliope's silhouette, but barely. Unlike the fog and the chains, this didn't sting like the desert. It felt like feathers against my skin. Finally, my head slipped out of the noose, and I was free. All I had to do was find the exit. If Henry continued to go this slowly, I'd have time to help free the others, and maybe they could talk some sense into him. But my feet were glued to the ground, not by some outside force, but because I couldn't leave Henry. If he stopped, Cronus would destroy him. He would destroy all of us, and I couldn't stand by and let that happen. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but I stayed. There were 10 bars in all. With each one Henry opened, Calliope lost more of her composure, until she dropped the chain completely. Jumping up and down, she clapped her hands and emitted a high-pitched squeal. My insides twisted into knots. This was it. Time seemed to stop, the fog muffling everything, and in that moment the world grew silent. The sound of whispers snaked toward me from the direction of the cave. My heart pounded. The others were awake. As the seventh crack echoed through the cavern, Calliope laughed gleefully, and in the fog someone grabbed my wrist. I struggled to break their grip, but the cold metal of a wedding ring brushed against my skin, and I stilled. Henry, what was he trying to do? Had he changed his mind? He only had 3 bars left to go, and it would be a matter of seconds before Calliope realized he wasn't going to do what she wanted anymore. Cronus surrounded us, and all it would take was— well, I wasn't entirely sure what, but he would kill every last one of us if Henry reneged. And then he pressed a painfully hot chain into my hand. Calliope's silhouette stopped moving. "Keep going," she demanded. "I can count just as well as you." "And if I don't," said Henry, an edge to his voice I hadn't been there before. Look around you, said Calliope. Use that brain of yours, Henry. What do you think will happen? Cronus will crush you. He will slowly grind your bones into dust and paint the walls with your blood. He will do the same to your wife, your sisters, and your brothers, and once he's finished, he will do the same to the ones who had the sense not to come. On second thought, it'd be much more entertaining if we kept you alive to watch the whole thing, wouldn't it? I was planning on making Walter watch, and I'm sure he'd enjoy the company. They're your family, too, I said, the chain burning my hands, but I refused to let go. If I couldn't see her, then she wouldn't see me. She couldn't see what Henry had done. Cronus was everywhere, though, and if he was paying attention. No, they're not, she spat. Not any more. The council has ruled for so long enough. They made a mockery of themselves and all I stand for. They tossed me aside as if I were nothing. Do you have any idea what that feels like? Of course you don't, Kate. You won. You have everything you want. Not everything. I didn't have Henry, and I wasn't sure I ever would. But I bit my tongue. The last thing she needed was a reason to blow me to bits. Her silhouette came into view as Calliope rounded on Henry. You and Walter will suffer the pain you put me through for all of these eons, and I promise to enjoy every moment of it. I couldn't see what she did to him, but Henry screamed this ugly, twisted sound that swallowed me whole until everything ceased to exist except my burning need to stop it. I moved toward her without thinking. The chain was fire in my hands, and I swung it as hard as I could. A sickening crack filled the cavern as it connected with the back of Calliope's head, and the links wrapped around her neck, burning her pretty face. I expected her to scream or shout or fight back somehow, and I wasn't going to hand it over to her that easily. I swung at her again and again, crazy with the need to make sure she never had another chance to hurt Henry or anyone else I loved, but finally someone caught my arm. Enough, said Henry. Look. My heart pounded as I inched forward, squinting through the fog. I clutched the chain, prepared to hit her again if she jumped out at me. Instead, my foot hit something warm and solid, Calliope. Henry wrapped his arm around me and grabbed Calliope's ankle. I stared at her limp body, torn between horror and satisfaction as blood dripped from the gash in her cheek. Leave, he called out, his voice booming beside his injuries. A hissing sound echoed through the cavern, and the air so hot I felt as if I were being boiled alive. Tiny knives pricked me, burrowing underneath my skin and turning to molten lava. I cried out, unable to handle the monstrous pain coursing through my body. My knees gave way, and Henry was there to catch me, and his chains clattered to the ground. He said nothing as he pulled me against him and buried my face in his chest. The next thing I knew, the stabs were gone, and the cool air engulfed me. It's all right, said Henry, in the soothing tone I'd wanted to hear so badly since stepping foot in the underworld. Even though he must have been hurting too, he ran his fingers through my hair comfortingly. You're safe. The agony of the fog seeping into my body hadn't left me, but as soon as I stood there, trembling, it didn't get any worse. I cracked open an eye, and when I saw the red wall, my stomach lurched. Who had Cronus killed? James? Ava? Or had he killed Calliope for failing him? As my vision focused, I realized we weren't in the cavern anymore. We stood in the entranceway of the palace, the one with the mirrors and the scarlet walls, and Calliope lay on the carpet, blood seeping from the wound in the back of her head. We were home. Chapter 13. Shadow. As the seconds ticked by like hours, the others appeared around us. Ava was first with Sophia. Their wrists were rubbed raw. James showed up next with Philip, who held a bloody cloth over his eye, and finally Walter and my mother appeared. She was clutching Persephone's hand. The moment I saw my mother, pale and shaken but in one piece, I wanted to dash toward her. An invisible force held me back, though, and I couldn't move, not while she held on to Persephone. My mother caught me staring. Her grip on Persephone tightened, and to my astonishment she dropped her hand and moved toward me instead. That was all the encouragement I needed. I rushed forward and hugged her, burying my nose in her hair. Even after all that time in the cave, she still smelled like apples and freesia. The faintest hint of smoke clung to her as well, but she was okay. Where is she? Said Walter, pushing through the cluster of dazed council members. Dylan, Irene, and the others who had remained behind were nowhere in sight, but they were probably working on the surface, I hoped. Here Henry stepped aside and gestured to Calliope. Walter knelt beside her, his wife, I reminded myself. I stared wide-eyed at the sight of the two of them together, him so old and her so not, and he brushed a lock of hair from his eyes. Oh, my dear, he whispered, but that one tender moment was gone as quickly as it had come. His expression had hardened, as he gathered her in his arms with no more than care than he would have shown a pile of rags. Henry, have you any place to keep her? Henry gestured for Walter to come with him. I wanted to follow, but my mother clung to me, and I didn't want to let her go. Are you all right? She said, pulling away enough to look me over head to toe. I'm fine, I said, even though that was a lie. I ached all over and my blood was practically boiling. But there was no use complaining about it when the others must have felt the same. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? She shook her head. I'm all right. It was a very brave thing you did, coming to find us. I averted my eyes and stared at the spot of blood on the carpet where Calliope had been moments before. It was stupid, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of that to happen. But I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Of course you couldn't, sweetheart. She gently wiped my dirty face with her sleeve and pressed her lips against my cheek. You wouldn't be you if you didn't do something. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Persephone step towards us, and my mother straightened. I refused to let go of her hand, and to my relief, her grip on mine didn't loose either. Kate's very brave, said Persephone without a hint of resentment. My hostility began to melt, and I opened my mouth to return the sentiment when Persephone added, a bit stupid and short-sighted and completely naive, but brave. That same sourness toward her solidified inside of me again. As much as I wanted to hate her, though, I couldn't, not when she'd risked everything to help. Had she really known Calliope and Cronus couldn't touch her? Now that it was over, I was sure she hadn't. Not when Calliope herself hadn't known. All the way she'd reacted back at the cottage when she found out Cronus hadn't been following us. No, she hadn't known, but she had done it anyway. We never would have found it without you, I said reluctantly, and my mother, our mother, reached out to take her hand. I'm so glad you two are getting along, she said. I never meant for you to meet under these circumstances, and I'm sorry it wasn't with you for it. At that moment it didn't matter that she hadn't told Persephone I existed. While I couldn't completely forget the nagging part of my brain, it reminded me again and again that I was Persephone's replacement, second best, nothing more than a spare part. For now I ignored it and forced myself to smile. After the ordeal of our mother had been through, I couldn't deny her that bit of happiness. Persephone, Henry's voice was barely louder than a whisper, but in the buzz of the foyer it cut through me. He stood in the hallway, his arms covered in blood and his clothing torn. But like he'd done in the cave, he stared past me and focused on Persephone instead. It was as if none of the past few weeks had happened, as if none of the past 1,000 years had happened. Hello, Hades, said my sister. It's been a long time. Henry slipped through the crowd to join us, and though he set his hand on the small of my back, he didn't look at me. Are you all right? He said, and Persephone rolled her eyes. Of course I am. I can't die twice. Henry hesitated, and my mother's grip on my hand tightened. She knew what he was going to do before he did it, but her warning didn't help. Henry pressed his lips to Persephone's cheek tenderly, and as Persephone kissed back, a wave of nausea swept over me. Come, said my mother to me. Neither Henry nor Persephone spared us a second glance as my mother led me through the foyer and into the hallway, and she wrapped her arm around my shoulder. It's been a very long time since they've seen one another. I know, I whispered, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Simply placing one foot in front of the other was torture. But I kept moving forward, needing to put as much distance between me and them as I could. When we reached the bedroom, I hesitated, but my mother pushed the door open anyway. You need to rest, she said, leading me toward the bed. I wanted to resist, but she looked almost as frail as she had when she fought cancer, and my intense fear of losing her spread through me, leaving me no chance to shake it off. You too, I insisted. I perched on the edge of the bed, but that was all I was willing to give until she took it easy as well. Sit. She didn't argue. Together, she and I curled up on the bed like she had 1,000 times before, whenever I'd gotten scared or lonely as a child, or when she'd gotten sick and I couldn't bear the thought of leaving her alone for an entire night. I'd been so afraid she would close her eyes and never wake up, it was difficult to reconcile the fear to the knowledge that she was immortal and wouldn't fade until she no longer had purpose in the world, or until Cronus killed her. And I would go on fighting before I let him hurt anyone else I loved. We lay there together as the time seemed to freeze around us. I counted each breath she took, and as she rubbed my back in circles, for a moment I managed to forget we were in the underworld, and I imagined we were in New York, a mother and only daughter, with nothing particularly special about them. I would be attending NYU by now, or maybe Columbia. Maybe if my mother hadn't gone sick, I would have met someone. Henry would have never broken my heart, and I would never have to know what it was like to live in the shadow of my sister. I could have been happy. My life would have been tame and short, but uncomplicated, and when I died I would have come here. No one more soul for Henry to watch over. None of this would have ever happened. As much as I wanted it, I knew it was only a fantasy. I would have never existed if it hadn't been for Henry and Persephone. No matter what happened, no matter what choices I made, my life would never have been simple. Even if I'd never known that gods really existed, my mother wouldn't have survived her cancer, and I would have been more alone than I was now. With Henry, my life was different. My life had purpose, but no one had ever stopped to consider if it was the life I wanted to lead. No one but James. No matter what choice I made, I couldn't compete with the soul-crushing love Henry felt for Persephone, and now that he had her back, I didn't know what right choice was anymore. "Mom," I whispered, "why did you decide to have me if all I was going to be was Persephone's replacement?" She opened her eyes, and for several seconds she said nothing. Enough time passed that I feared she wouldn't answer, but finally she kissed my forehead. "Do you really believe all you are to me is a replacement for your sister?" I nodded. I didn't want to believe it, but after everything that had happened, after being plagued by doubts for so long, I couldn't help it. My mother sighed. "If we're going to talk, let's at least get cleaned up a bit." She slid off the bed and disappeared into my closet, and I said nothing. I knew she loved me as much as I loved her, but what would have happened if I hadn't passed the test? Would she have let go of my hand, too? When she returned, she had a change of clothes with her, and I reluctantly got off the bed. Despite Eva cleaning them regularly, the jeans and sweater I wore were ruined, and as soon as I took them off, my mother vanished them. Wait, what? Yeah, it says vanished, not washed. Vanished them. "No," she said, as I dressed in the pajamas she picked out for me. "Tell me what's bothering you." I didn't know how to begin. Everything had gone wrong from the day I'd arrived in the other world, and as often as the likes of Ava and my mother wanted to reassure me that Henry loved me, he didn't. Not really. He couldn't. I wasn't Persephone. It was more than that, though. So much more, and the only place to start was the beginning. "Every part of my life was planned," I said thickly. "When I was born, how I was raised, what you taught me, it was all to pass the test, wasn't it?" She nodded slowly, as if she wasn't sure what was so wrong with that. "Of course, sweetheart. I wanted to give you the best chance of success you could have, especially after what happened to the others." I tugged on the hem of my pajama top. "You knew someone would try to kill me, and you let me go anyway." She furrowed her brow. Finally she seemed to get it. "Kate, honey, I would have never allowed it if I hadn't been sure that every possible precaution was being taken. Before you, only a few of us oversaw the tests. With you, that all changed. I insisted. So did Henry. He wanted to protect you. We all did. That was why one of us was always with you. That was why we all watched you go through the tests. My mother hadn't been there in Eden Manor, but I'd talked to her every night in my dreams. I'd thought it was a gift from Henry, a chance to allow me to say goodbye to her, and maybe part of it was. But she'd pressed me to share everything, and I had almost. It was the parts I hadn't told her that had gotten me killed. She settled behind me and brushed my hair in slow strokes, working her way gently through the tangles. "From the moment we drove into Eden, you were protected. James, Ava, Sophia, even Dylan and Irene. That was why they were there, partially to guide you, but mostly to be sure nothing happened to you. We'd watched 11 other girls die because of us, and don't think we were so callous that we didn't care. We all did, especially Henry. From the moment the council ruled that I could have you, the council ruled I could be born?" "Yes," she said, separating my hair into 3 sections before she began to braid it. "I've told you this before, my love. Henry decided he wanted to give up, and didn't want him to. So instead of going out and finding another girl, you decided to make one." I swallowed hard. Tears stung my eyes. "That's all you told me. You didn't say that the only reason I existed was because you all sat around and debated it." I stared up at the ceiling, trying in vain to contain the swell of anguish that filled me. "All I was ever supposed to be was Henry's wife, and you knew. You knew he was always going to be in love with Persephone. You knew he would never feel the same way about me, and you did it anyway." She wrapped her arms around me from behind. "Kate." I glared at my hands, refusing to hug her back. She could deny it or rationalize it all she wanted, but that wouldn't change what had happened. "Yes," she finally said. "That was why you were born. All of us came into this world for a reason, whether it's love or purpose or even or even as an accident. You were no accident, and I have loved you from the moment I knew you would exist. Even if it hadn't been then, you would have been born eventually. I wanted another child for a long time, and I put it off. Because I was ashamed, I made myself think I didn't deserve another. I thought I didn't deserve you." "Why?" I said, hiccuping. "What were you ashamed of? Persephone?" "Partially," said my mother. "I was ashamed of how little she cared for Henry's well-being, and how selfishly she had acted. I was never ashamed of her," she added. "She is my daughter just as you are, and nothing could ever make me love either of you any less." I sniffed. "But she was miserable with him. It isn't her fault that he fell in love with her, or that she fell in love with someone else. You can't force two people together and make them live happily ever after. It doesn't work that way. She shifted on the bed so she was beside me. Is that how you feel, like I forced you to be with Henry? I shook my head, then nodded, then shook my head again. I don't know, I mumbled. I didn't have a choice to meet him, though. But you did have a choice whether or not to be with him, she said gently. He waited for you, but if you didn't love him, if you didn't want to do this, none of this would have been forced on you. It feels like you did, I whispered dejectedly. Without this, I'm not anyone. I didn't have time to figure out who I was, and now I don't know how to do that and still be who you want me to be. She sighed and hugged me a little tighter. The only person I want you to be is yourself. You aren't Persephone's replacement. You are my daughter, and I'm so proud of you. Nothing will ever change that. You are my light, and if I hadn't thought you would be unbelievably happy with Henry, I would have never allowed this to happen. It doesn't matter how happy I am with him. That doesn't change how he feels about Persephone. No, it doesn't, she admitted, but it will. Henry's been stuck for a very long time, and the history we have together, he won't get over her immediately, but the thing that you have to understand is that before now he didn't have a reason to try. Now he has you. I hiccuped again. Do you really think I can match up to her? She nuzzled the top of my head. If I had you all those years ago, when Henry was still unmarried, you would have been the one I'd have offered him, not Persephone. I gave her a bewildered look, and she chuckled. Oh, sweetheart, the idea of a woman choosing who she marries is brand new. When it comes down to it, Persephone had thousands of years with him. But you know what? You'll have now until forever, if that's what you want. She paused. Is it? I want it to be, I said softly, really, really badly. Then give yourself time to let it happen. Being with Henry doesn't mean you have to give up who you are. Henry doesn't define you, nor does the underworld or immortality. You define you. And the more you act like yourself, the more Henry will love you too. I guarantee it. I wanted to believe her, and as I closed my eyes again, I decided that for now I would. Persephone and Adonis to return to, and she would be here forever. Maybe seeing her would even be good for Henry. It could give him a chance to remember that she wasn't the girl in his reflection who was happy to see him every September. I could be that girl, though. I wanted to be. I didn't say anything else as I curled against my mother. She continued to rub my back, and the tension seeped out of me as the minutes passed. She was still here, in a world where my mother was alive and healthy couldn't possibly be that bad. A knock on the door startled me, and I sat up and wiped my puffy eyes. Yeah, I said, and the door cracked open. Kate? Henry. I exchanged a look with my mother, and she smiled encouragingly. Come in, I said. He stepped inside and closed the door. He was clean now, and somehow he changed clothes without coming into the bedroom. Was there another closet in the in the palace if he decided he didn't want to stay with me? And who had helped him clean the blood off his pale skin like I had done so many weeks before? I didn't have to think about that too hard to come up with the answer. Walter is requesting you, said Henry, and when my mother stood, he shook his head. Not you, Diana, Kate. There was something off about the way he said my name, and I pushed it aside. Whatever it was, it undoubtedly had something to do with Persephone, and the more I thought about her, the more everything hurt. After the journey through the underworld, I wanted the single afternoon where I didn't have to feel second best. I was willing to wait for Henry like he'd waited for me, but that didn't mean the time in between now and when he was ready to love me would be painless. Confused, I climbed off the bed and excused myself to the bathroom. My skin was rubbed raw everywhere I'd been exposed to fog, and now that I'd calmed down, I had to move gingerly if I didn't want to wince. Under normal circumstances, I would have changed out of my pajamas to see the king of the gods, but today was anything but normal, and this was supposed to be my home now. If I wanted to wander around in pajamas, I would. Besides, anything else would have made the pain worse. I made an effort not to think about what Walter wanted, while I gently washed my face to reprimand me, I was sure, but there was no use in worrying about it until I was standing in front of him. Henry wouldn't let him banish me from the underworld, I hoped. And if he did, well, at least I'd know for sure Henry didn't want me any more. I heard my mother speaking quietly on the other side of the door, but when I stepped out of the bathroom, she immediately fell silent. What? I said, and she shook her head. Nothing, sweetheart. I'll see you in a bit. I would have had to be blind to miss the exasperated look she gave Henry, but I said nothing as she led me out of the room into the hallway. Are you feeling all right? He said, clasping his hands behind his back. Gathering the determination I had left, I slipped my hand into his arm and refused to let go, and he tensed. One day he wouldn't, and until then he had to get used to me being there. I've had better months, I said, a weak attempt at a joke. He didn't smile. Did Theo heal you? He nodded. I fetched the others a short while ago. I will send Theo over to our room once Walter has finished with you. That sounded ominous. Is he mad? No, said Henry, he is not. Something was still off, and I hugged his arm, pleased when he didn't move away. Are you? This time his face remained blank. Of course he was angry. If what my mother had said was true, then he'd spent 6 months fighting like to keep me safe, and on top of failing when it mattered most, I'd run after a Titan less than a day after arriving in the underworld. Not exactly the smartest thing I'd ever done, but I hadn't had a choice. Surely Henry understood that. I won't say I'm sorry, I said, not for going after you and my mother, but I am sorry for scaring you. And I'm sorry for not listening to James and staying out of the cavern. He unclasped his hands and took mine. He didn't hold on tightly, but it was more than I expected, and hope fluttered inside of me. Do not apologize, he said. I am aware we left you and the others with no choice. I am the one who should apologize for having put you in that situation to begin with. So he was blaming himself. Somehow that didn't feel much better than him blaming me. It wasn't your fault, though. You had no idea what Calliope and Cronus were planning, and you did your best with what you had. Yes, he said softly, I suppose we did. That makes what Walter and I were about to ask of you even more foolish. We stopped in front of the nondescript door, and I frowned. What do you mean? Henry let go of my hand to set his on the doorknob, but he didn't turn it yet. I will be with you the entire time, he said. Nothing will happen to you. My heart fluttered, and I racked my brain for what he and Walter might want me to do that would scare Henry like this. Of course, nothing would happen to me unless Cronus was inside. As he opened the door, I realized what he meant, and all the tension that he'd left me earlier flooded back. I stopped cold, and he draped his arm around my shoulders protectively. With her face bloodied and marked by the chain I'd used against her, Calliope stared at me, her eyes narrowed and unblinking. She was awake. Chapter 14 Interrogation. The burning hatred in Calliope's eyes made every bone in my body freeze in place, as if she turned me to stone. I wasn't afraid of her, not really. But anyone with an ounce of self-preservation would have stopped short when facing that kind of loathing. Walter stood beside her, his hands on her shoulders, but it didn't look like a protective gesture. She sat in a chair made of steel, shimmering bands around her wrists and ankles held her in place in the corner. Philip silently faced her, with his arms crossed over his broad chest, and there was a deep silver scar running through his left eye. It had turned milky white. Kate, said Walter with a nod. Hi, I said, wishing my voice wasn't shaking so much. What's going on? I'm sorry to disturb you, but I'm afraid we had no choice. He tightened his grip on Calliope's shoulders, and her jaw clenched. It seems Calliope refuses to talk to anyone but you. My heart sank. I glanced at Henry to confirm it, and he nodded stiffly. That's fine, I said, even though it was anything but, and I took a deep breath to steady myself. Obviously, this was important. Whatever you need. A cushioned chair appeared a few feet in front of Calliope, and Henry let go of me so I could sit down. I fidgeted, certain that if it were in Calliope's power, she would have made me burst into flames right then and there. All right, Calliope, said Walter. She is here as you asked. Tell us what we want to know. His voice seemed to echo in the plain room, as if it were really dozens of people talking at once. It was nothing like the same kind of tone that Calliope had used in the cavern. If Walter wanted to, I was positive he could destroy the world with a single thought. No wonder he had been appointed the head of the council. Calliope remained silent, and Walter sighed. It was a sound a father made when his child was giving him the silent treatment, not the kind of sigh an interrogator made when his subject clammed up. For all of his power, Walter would not use it against her. I was sure of it. She was family. I didn't know if it was all right with that or not. Walter had done terrible things to her, unintentionally or not, and he'd put her through hell. But like James had insisted, it didn't excuse her for all she'd done, and Walter had an obligation to ensure that none of it happened again. We all did. Please talk to us, I said, relieved when my voice stayed steady. Whatever happened with Cronus, it's over now, and Walter and Philip and Henry, they're not going to hurt you. I could feel Henry tense behind me. If he had his way, she'd be a pile of ashes by now. A slow smile spread across Calliope's face, and her eyes glinted with malice. You think it's over? Henry opened 7 of the bars. It was only a matter of time before Cronus broke out completely anyway, but now he will be out by the winter solstice. When he's free, he will come for me, and he will destroy all of you for holding him captive. No one told Calliope she was wrong. The 3 brothers all watched us, and not one of them bothered to tell her that the council would contain Cronus. It was because they couldn't. Cronus would escape anyway, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Because of me, Cronus would do exactly what he wanted, and without Calliope, the council was powerless to stop him. As brave as I wanted to appear, all of the blood drained from my face, and I clenched my hands together in my lap. Henry rubbed the back of my neck, and I felt relief from his touch. It had been for nothing. Calliope, said Walter gently, you know what will happen not only to us, but the entire world. Cronus will reclaim it as his, and there will be no one left to protect humanity. Calliope sniffed, but she said nothing. Please, said Walter, join us, and together we will defeat him once more. You know we cannot do it without your abilities, and if you do this for us, we will forgive your transgressions. Everything you have done will be forgotten, and your punishment will be lifted. You will be welcomed back as our queen, and we will put this incident behind us and move on with our lives. And what? Said Calliope, all signs of her smugness gone. Kate will live happily ever after with Henry, and I'll have to watch you break your vows to me every time you spot a pretty girl? No, Walter, I am quite happy with where I am. Cronus rewards loyalty, and all I have received for my loyalty to you is a broken heart and a bastard stepchildren. And what do you think your loyalty to Cronus will get you? He said. The ashes of those who you love most, and nothing but loneliness for the rest of eternity if he does not tire of you sooner? That is what awaits you if you continue down this path. At least I will have the satisfaction of knowing you are dead. That will do more to keep me warm at night than you ever have. Then this conversation is over. Walter let go of her and added to his brothers, what do you want to do with her? I suppose finding a way to make her fade would be too much to ask of you, said Henry coolly. Since Cronus's prison it will be empty soon, perhaps you could take his place. An excellent idea, said Walter, and he looked at Philip for approval. Philip nodded, and Walter clapped his hands together. It is decided. Calliope will take Cronus's place, and if we defeat him, she shall join him in his prison. If she decides between now and then to help us fight, we will reconvene and decide what to do from there. You may go, Kate. I stood, and Calliope's eyes never left mine. I couldn't tear myself away, caught between sympathy and bafflement. She was going to destroy us, and she knew it, yet she was happy to sit by and watch. Walter had offered her a way out of all this in exchange for her help, and she still insisted on fighting against the council, knowing what that meant. You're an idiot, I said before I could stop myself. You're going to get not just the entire council killed, but every single human being as well. The world's going to be a wasteland, and what happens to you then? You'll fade. You'll fade with the rest of us. Is that what you want? I would rather fade than spend a moment longer in your presence, said Calliope with an eerie calm, as if she were in complete control, as if Henry and Walter and Philip were even in the room with us. If that is what it takes to see you all dead, then so be it. That's a cause I am willing to fade for. Worms swarmed in my mind, angry and stinging every inch of me, and I tried in vain to find the right ones to say. Nothing in the world was going to convince Calliope to relent, though. Nothing except, then kill me, I said quickly, before the brothers could protest. Do it now. I want you to, if it'll mean you'll help them recapture Cronus. No, said Henry sharply. His grip on my shoulder tightened like a vice, but I ignored him. This was between me and Calliope. She laughed, a dark, muted sound that was empty of any real humor. Do you really think that's all I want? She said in a sickly, sweet voice. Perfect Kate, so willing to martyr herself for nothing. And it just died. So I have to plug this in. Let me check that I've got the correct one. I think it's this one. Let me look. Yep, it's this one. Okay. Well, since my Nook has died and I have to charge it before I can read it anymore, I'll just have to charge it and come back a little later. I was actually close to the place where I would have stopped, though, so I was just like about a chapter and a half away. Because I would have stopped at chapter like 15 or 16. So I'm going to go ahead and end this stream, and then I will come back in a little bit. Thank you for listening. Good night.